Hello, everybody, and welcome back for my continuation of my book reading of Stephen King's The Breeding Method. Chapter 1 The Club. I have to say that I dressed with more than my usual speed that night of 23rd December, and I suspect that there were other members of the club who did the same. Outside, snow lay on the ground, and a biting cold wind blew through the streets of New York. It is difficult to get a taxi on that sort of night, so I had phoned for one to call for me at 8 o'clock. I had done this at 5:30 p.m. when my wife looked a little surprised but said nothing. By 7:45 p.m. I was waiting outside the apartment building where Ellen and I had lived since 1946. And when the taxi was 5 minutes late, I found myself walking up and down, feeling annoyed. But when it arrived at 8:10 p.m. and I got in, I was too glad to be out of the wind to be angry with the driver. It began to snow again, and when at last I got out of the taxi, I had to bend over against the wind and hold my hat on my head. With one hand, as I walked the last few yards. A 73-old man feels the cold quicker and deeper. That man should be at home in front of a warm fire. Snow was blowing into my face as I arrived at the house at 249 East 35th Street. I was glad to see that Stevens had cleaned the snow off the steps outside. Stevens knew about old bones breaking easily. He was there holding the door open, and a moment later I was inside. I went into the room, which was the library, reading room, and bar. It was a dark room with occasional circles of light from reading lamps. A large fire burned in the fireplace, and the heat came all the way across to meet me. Surely there is no better welcome for anyone than a warm fire. Stevens helped me take off my overcoat, saying that it was an awful cold night and that there would be more snow before morning. I agreed and looked back into that high-ceilinged room again. A cold night, a big warm fire, and a ghost story. I felt something warm in my chest at the thought, something not caused by the fire or Stevens' welcome. I think it was because it was McCarran's turn to tell the tale. On the night, Emlyn McCarran told his story, the story of the breeding method. There were perhaps 13 members, although only 6 of us had come out on that freezing night. I had visited the house, which stands at 249 East 35th Street, for 10 years. Not quite a regular visitor, but almost. In my own mind, I think of it as a gentleman's club, but I'm not sure it really is. How did the club begin? I suppose Stevens might know, because I am sure he has been there from the beginning, wherever that was. And I'm sure Stevens is much older than he looks. Much, much older. He speaks with a New York accent, but is as cool and correct as an English servant. His small smile is a locked door to the room where he keeps his thoughts. There are no phones. There is no club secretary. And the club, if it is a club, has never had a name. I first came here as a guest of George Waterhouse, my boss at the law company where I worked in New York. I had been with the company since 1951, although I was still not a partner, and there were other men who began at the same time as me, but who now had more important jobs than I did. Waterhouse and I were friendly enough, but no more than that. So it was a surprise when he came into my office that day in November 19 60. But most of the time he was there, he talked about unimportant things, and I began to wonder why he had really come to see me. Then he said, "There is a place I go on Thursday nights, a sort of club. Old men, most of them are, but some have interesting stories to tell, and the wine is excellent. Why don't you come down one night, David, as my guest?" I gave some sort of reply, but I don't remember, because I was so surprised by his offer. It sounded like something he had just thought of. But one look at his blue eyes, told me that he had planned it. Yet suddenly I had a strange feeling. I know that this would happen. Ellen was both amused and annoyed that evening when I told her about the invitation. I had been with Waterhouse, Carden, Lawton, Fraser, and Effingham for almost 20 years. I was not likely to move any higher than my present job. It was her opinion that this was the company's way of keeping me happy without paying me any more money or making me partner. There will be a lot of old men telling war stories or playing card games, she said about the club. Nothing happened for several weeks when I remembered Waterhouse's odd offer. From a man I usually met less than 10 or 12 times a year. I guess I had made a mistake about that look in his eyes. It had not been a serious offer at all, just something to make conversation. Perhaps he was sorry now that he had invited me, I thought. And then one afternoon, as I was leaving the office, he said, "Why not come and have a drink at the club tonight?" Well, Good, he said. I put a piece of paper into my hand, gave the address. He was waiting for me outside, 249 East 35th Street, that evening, where Stevens held open the door for us to go in. The wine was excellent. Waterhouse did not introduce me to any of the others, but 2 or 3 introduced themselves to me. One was Emlyn McCarran, then in his early 70s. He held out a hand and I took it for a moment. His skin was dry and hard, and he asked me if I played cards. I said that I did not. Good, he said. Cards had done more to kill after dinner conversation than anything I can think of, and he walked away into a corner of the library where shelves of books went high up into darkness above. Waterhouse has disappeared, so I walked across the fireplace, feeling a little uncomfortable, as I sometimes do amongst strangers. The fireplace was big enough to cook a cow, whole, cut into the stone above. It were some words. "It is the tale, not he who tells it." "Here you are, David," Waterhouse said from behind me, and I jumped. He gave me a glass. "A martini, yes?" Yes, thank you, Mr. Waterhouse." "George," he said. "This is George." "George then," I said, although it seems a little mad to be using his first name. "With all of." "Cheers," he said. We drank. "Perfect." "Perfect," I said instead of finishing my question. Stevens looked after the bar. "He makes excellent martinis." "Did I sign a guest book?" I asked. He looked surprised. "We don't have anything like that," he said, "or I don't think we do." I saw Stevens walk past in the doorway, the far end of the room. He looked like a ghost in his white bar jacket. George put his drink on a table and threw some wood onto the fire. What does that mean? I asked, pointing to the words over the fireplace. Waterhouse read it carefully, as if for the first time. It is the tale, not he who tells it. I suppose I have an idea about it, he said. You may too, in time. If you got back, enjoy yourself, David. He walked away. I did enjoy myself, to begin with. I have always loved books. There were hundreds of interesting ones to look at there. I walked slowly along beside the shelves, reading the titles and the names of the authors. Once I stopped by a narrow window and I looked out at the traffic light on 2nd Avenue. I watched the colors change through the ice-covered glass. Red to green and back to red again. Suddenly, yet slowly, a peaceful feeling came over me. I can't explain that feeling, it made no sense. But it made me think, for the first time for years, about winter nights in the Wisconsin farmhouse where I grew up. It made me remember lying in my bed in the cold upstairs room, listening to the biting wind outside, and the way I thought about the miles of deep snow, and then compared it with my warm and comfortable body inside my bed. And with this, I'm going to stop it here for chapter 1. Sorry about that. This first chapter is going to be a little bit longer, so I'm going to cut it into several pieces. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.